Technique number 4, drag the shutter. Dragging the shutter means you're going to use a long shutter speed. And what I said about flash was every time you use a flash, you're shooting 2 exposures in one. One, the camera and the ambient light, and then the flash exposure. You can create exposures with very long shutter speeds, especially if there's some sort of motion in the background. It could have a very powerful effect. Let's look at this photo, and you can see my settings. I'm shooting a 24mm lens. I'm at 1/4 of a second. So I'm opening up my shutter and elongating it, letting a lot of time in because I want the motion of the waves to create a dreamy look. Also, I am hand holding this, so I'm not putting it on a tripod. So therefore, in the background, you can see that the clouds are a little bit blurry because I'm hand holding it. And that's okay, because if you see the subject, she is razor sharp. So because I'm in a dark area, when that flash fires for that moment in time and firing at a very fast duration. So like I said before, the flash could be at 1/1000th of a second. It could be even at 1/10,000th of a second. I believe I was probably at 1/64th power or somewhere around there. So it was a very fast shutter speed. And so that light fires and then immediately it falls off. And because there's no ambient light in that area, she's frozen in time on my sensor, razor sharp. And therefore, what's also being picked up is the waves with the ambient light hitting the waves, making it slightly blurry. So this is 2 exposures in one. One, shutter is controlling the ambient light. I'm opening that up to make it have some blurry waves in there. And then my flash is the other exposure lighting my subject. Let's go to the setup with this so you can see that I didn't have an umbrella. All I had was a 5-in-1 reflector, so we pulled out the diffuser on that and fired the flash through it to give us a softbox effect. And so you can see that, how she's illuminated. And you can actually, in this photo, see how actually dark it is. So what you want to do is again, expose for the background first. I'm at 1/4 second. I adjust my ISO and I adjust my f-stop to give me that background that I wanted. I wanted to still see the sky and the sunset. The sun went below the horizon, but there was a little bit of light in that sky that I wanted you to see. And that's what I set my exposure to. This looks best with there's some sort of moving background, whether it could be lights or in this case, it was the ocean moving, giving it that motion. Make sure that the subject is in a dark area with low or no ambient light. And then you add your flash to taste. So you set your background first. Your subject's in a very dark area. You might not be able to see your subject and you might have to have somebody hold an iPhone next to her so you can focus, or turn a video light on briefly so you can focus and then turn it off. So that's the only issue, is focusing in the dark, but often I just use an iPhone, or a lot of times I have a little flashlight or video light that I shine on the subject and that I focus. Now you gotta turn that off, or else it's gonna totally affect the exposure. So remember to turn that light off and just use it for focusing purposes. And then you add your flash. If it's too strong, you reduce the flash power. If it's not strong enough, you make it stronger. And I told you there was 4 ways to do that. Whatever way, I like using distance because it's easy. Let's look at the next photo and revisit that photo that I said in the beginning. And now you can kind of understand it a little bit. How did I go about it? The first thing is I saw, you know what? Even though the sun went below the horizon and there's just a little bit light in the sky with some clouds in it that look interesting. And so I set my exposure to get that. And so I was at 1/6 of a second, f8 at ISO 200 in order for you to see those clouds. The subject, on the other hand, was in a completely dark area. So you wouldn't even be able to see her even when I'm at 1/6 of a second. So what did I use to illuminate her? I had my flash. I remember this precisely. I had my flash at 1/16 power to light her up, and you can see the little frozen in time beads of water because the flash fired on and off real fast. And when that light, that flash duration no longer lit the scene, even though those beads are falling down, there's no light to illuminate it, so you can't see it. And so that freezes in time. If you are getting a blurry shot when you're using flash, what is the reason? The reason is there's too much ambient light in your setting. So for example, let's say that there was a lot of ambient light in this shot. You would fire your flash goes off, so there's no more flash. But as that bead of water is going down, there's a lot of ambient light hitting it and registering it in your camera, and your camera can see it because there's a lot of ambient light. So if you want your subject razor sharp, you have to make sure your subject is in an area where there is no ambient light. It's like they're in darkness. And then you can use this technique to make sure that now your flash is acting like your shutter speed and not your camera. I'm going to show you a situation where you can have the same lighting situation, but completely two different effects by simply changing your shutter. Let's look at this first picture. I wanted to kind of create a silhouette shot and just get some nice rim light. So I had two side lights slightly behind the subjects. And I took this photo at f13, ISO 400, and I had it at 1/160th of a second. So keeping things relatively razor sharp. And a different effect where I'm raising my shutter and limiting the ambient light in. I am going to take this next photo. It is the exact same lighting situation, but instead of 1/60th of a second, I am going to put my shutter at 1.3 seconds, and I'm hand holding this. I'm not using a tripod. I'm kneeling down, resting the camera on my leg and firing it, but I'm not using a tripod. So let's go to the next photo, and you can see it has quite a different look. And I have 1.3 seconds because that's the shutter speed needed to actually see the background and the clouds. The naked eye couldn't see it, but by opening up my shutter, you could actually see the clouds there when your naked eye couldn't. So this is a cool effect to do, and just to prove it that this subject is razor sharp, this next slide shows a close-up of her profile, and you can see that it's razor sharp even at 1.3 seconds. It's because she was in a completely dark area with no ambient light, and so therefore the flash acts as your shutter, or the flash duration, I should say, acts as your shutter. So look at the two, right? You have a silhouette type of shot, or you have more of a long shutter speed, open light type of feel to it. What is your vision? Do you understand these flash techniques so you can express your vision and create totally different looks by just adjusting your shutter speed? Understanding flash is very powerful because you can get a wide range of effects. Whether if you want to drag your shutter or make it faster, can completely change the look of the photo, even with the same lighting situation. Now let's do something drastic. This next photo, I didn't even use a trigger, if you can believe that. How did I do this? So let's go actually to the setup on the next slide. And the setup shows you exactly what I did. First, I tried to create a black box as much as possible. I had it at f11, ISO 100 at 2.5 seconds, and I changed my white balance to tungsten because there was a lot of orange light in the room that I wanted to get rid of. So I changed it to tungsten to add more blue on the scene to negate that orange that was in that room. And what I did was set my exposure. I wanted 2.5 second shutter, okay? And that 2.5 seconds would allow some people behind the subject run around with their iPhones or smartphones on with the light on, giving me the trail of light. But I needed them to run around for 2.5 seconds. And so the background looked great at 2.5 seconds with these camera settings, f11, ISO 100. So you always set your background first, but you want to make sure that you get the shutter speed that you need. So you set your shutter speed, then everything around it. So in this case, I set my shutter speed. I need 2.5 seconds. Set it at 2.5 seconds. And then what made the room look how I wanted it to look was f11 and ISO 100. Then what did I do? I needed to calculate my flash at f11 and using the inverse square law, bringing it in half the distance at 3 feet. Why did I bring the flashes in 3 feet? I wanted to narrow the light. I didn't want that light spread all around and ruining the iPhone light behind them. I wanted it to keep it and create a spotlight on my subject. So the closer I get that light to the subject, the less it will spray around to other areas. So that's why I moved it in 3 feet. So I did my calculations. I know at f11, at 6 feet away, my flash should be at 1/2 power. Now I'm bringing it half the distance. So I have to half it, which is 1/4 power. Then I have to half it again, which is 1/8 power. So that's how I determined the flash power on my 2 side lights. So 1/8 power, 3 feet away at f11, I'm ready to go. So what did I do? I said, 1, 2, 3, click. This is the reason why I do not need a trigger. Because how long is my shutter open? 2.5 seconds, right? All I have to do, there were 2 people holding the 2 flashes. They just had to fire it within 2.5 seconds when I said, ready, go. That's pretty easy to do. And you don't even need a flash trigger for that because you're keeping your shutter open so long, you just tell people go, boom, they hit the flash, right? And so that's what they did. And what? I got the exposure of the subject. That flash went away and then all you could see was the trails of lights of them running around in the background with their iPhone. This is a fantastic photo you can do, at your wedding parties, or if you have a group of people that you want to do something fun and you want to spell a word. Do you ever see those shots where they're trying to spell a word in the background? This is it. It's dragging your shutter and using this technique. Now, The beauty about this is if you remember these settings, if you can be in a completely dark situation where you're at F11, ISO 100, and you put your shutter at 2.5 seconds, and if you fire it without the flash and it's still dark, then you can do this shot and have these settings. All you go is like, okay, I need 2 standard flashes at 8th power, 3 feet away. You guys are gonna run around for 2.5 seconds. Make sure you know how to get your flashlight on your phone. And when I say go, start running around. Boom, it's just easy. I have already figured out the formula for you because we have the calculator. You can do this anywhere in the world and get this effect off. And that's what I love about Flash, is because you can take studio settings with you anywhere and get the same effect time and time again, whether you're in Los Angeles or whether you're in Paris. It doesn't matter at that point. Dragging your shutter is very powerful because you're taking advantage of capturing 2 exposures at once. The long exposure you're shooting with your camera and the ambient light, and the exposure of the flash momentarily lighting your subject to keep it sharp as long as your subject is in a very dark area. Use this technique. It's very powerful, and it's one of the unique techniques you can do with Flash.